Hi, welcome back to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith. In this episode, we're going to go over how you put together your army. This will allow you to come to the table ready to play, or if you're thinking about picking up some miniatures, it might help you decide which ones you want to collect first. To build your army, it has to be made up of one or more platoons, and how you organize those platoons are explained in the book. Looking at the Allied forces for a moment, we can choose to build either a combat platoon, an elite platoon, or an assault platoon. And depending on which one we pick, we'll be given a certain limited number of choices between the units we can put into each section of the army or support unit. And then we're also given a special order. This is a unique action that this particular platoon can take during gameplay that's different than the special orders of the other platoons. When we come back, let's go over how to build an elite platoon together. To start, your platoon must have a command section. This is the mandatory unit chosen to lead the platoon. In this case, it can be either a heavy ranger command squad or a hero with the leader special ability that allows it to become the command section of an elite platoon. So we can see that the core officers are a heavy ranger command squad, and so they could make up the command section of our platoon. Or if we chose, we could take Rhino, a hero who has a leader ability that says he can be the command section of an elite platoon instead of the heavy ranger command squad. However, we'll choose the heavy rangers as our command section. Below the command section, we also have to have a first section, which is a mandatory unit. And we can choose either the heavy ranger assault squad, heavy ranger attack squad, heavy ranger tank hunter squad, or the British paratroopers to be the unit that makes up this section. And remember, all these various unit types are all clearly identified in the Army section of the manual. So for our first section, I'm going to choose the Heavy Ranger Assault Squad. The command and first section are the only mandatory sections of a platoon. So technically, this is a very small but complete platoon. But it's not very exciting. So let's continue adding sections to this. For the optional second section, let's choose the Recon Ranger Squad. And from the options in the third section, let's take the Heavy Ranger Attack Squad. So here are the models in the Recon Ranger Squad, and our old friends the Grim Reapers, the Heavy Ranger Attack Squad. And we'll stop there with that third section. Now for every 2 sections you include in your platoon, you are allowed to add a support unit, which are usually your vehicles or other special units. In this situation, we took a command section, first section, second section, and third. That's a total of 4 sections. So we can take 2 of these support units if we want. Let's grab both the Ranger Sniper Team and an M1 Series Assault Light Walker. So here's our Black Hawk Walker and our Sniper Team. I'm sure you can figure out which is which. And there you have it, a legal, complete elite platoon. Or is it legal? One aspect about this we didn't talk about is the army point value of your forces. Not all of the units are created equally. So to help ensure balance when you come to the table to face your opponent, normally you and your opponent will decide on a certain army point value. This is like a budget that each of the units you pick will eat up. And you have to make sure that the total value of your army doesn't exceed the budget that you and your opponent picked. For example, the Grim Reapers here have an army point value of 30, whereas our Sniper Team here is only going to take up 12 points of our army budget. Once again, the book gives us the information we need. If me and my opponent decided we wanted to build 150-point armies, then it would have to be a single platoon, like we just built, and it could only have up to 1 hero in that force. If we wanted to go with a 250-point army, it would fall in this range, meaning we could have 1 or 2 platoons with up to 2 heroes in that force. So let's take a look at the value of the platoon that we just built. Our command section is 30 army points. Our first section is 28. Our second is 16, our third section is 30, and then we also add in 2 support units. A Sniper Team worth 12, and the Black Hawk vehicle is 25, for a grand total of 141 army points. Now if my opponent and I had agreed on building 150-point armies, this isn't too bad, but if we'd agreed on 250 points, I better get back in the book and start building a second platoon, or I'm probably going to be outmatched. Now when you have just a few points left over, like I do in this situation, and you don't want them to go to waste, you might want to spend them on platoon upgrades. Each army, Axis and Allies, has access to some unique platoon upgrades. I'm not going to go over all of them, they're in the book, but I'll give you an example of one of them. If I wanted to, I could spend 5 army points to buy airdrop. After we had placed all of our units on the table at the beginning of a battle, I could hold back one of my units and instead airdrop it in once I see where everything is, so I can place it almost anywhere in a very strategic position. So that's a nice little advantage you might be able to add to your platoon. If I had more army points, I might consider adding a hero like Bazooka Joe to my army. So let's talk about heroes for a moment because they have their own unique qualities. When you add them to your army, you can choose to have them act independently, so they become their own force separate from your platoon. Heroes generally have a variety of unique weapons and skills. They have a health greater than 1, so that means they can also soak up quite a bit of damage. They're also very courageous, so they never take suppression tokens. Now that said, if you want, instead of having them act independently, in some cases you can join them to other units, so they become part of a unit and therefore part of the platoon. And as we saw earlier, they can also become the command section of certain platoons. Now as an example, when you're deploying your units to the battlefield at the start of the game, and we'll see how you do that in a later video, you can choose to deploy a hero attached to that unit as long as that unit has the same movement and armor classification of the hero. So if we look at those hammers, the unit you just saw me placing on the table, they have a movement of 12 and an armor classification of 3. And here's Rhino, the hero model you saw me try to attach to that unit. It has a movement of 6 and an armor class of 3. And I wanted to use this as an example because this is one of the few times in the book they actually have an error in the stats, because this should actually be a 12. If you go to the Fantasy Flight Games website, you'll find the fact where it says so. So that means that this Rhino, it has a movement and armor class that does match the unit I'm trying to attach it to. If instead I wanted to attach Bazooka Joe to that unit, his movement is 6 and his armor class is 2, so he could not be joined to that unit. So when a hero model like Rhino joins a unit, he becomes the unit leader. Also, because he's now part of a unit and the unit can take suppression tokens, that means that Rhino will now suffer the effects of suppression. However, with that leader in the unit itself will never retreat regardless of how many suppression tokens stack up. One thing we mentioned earlier is that sometimes, like in the case of Rhino, he has the leader special ability that says he can be the command section of an elite platoon. So if we wanted to, we could have Rhino replace the corps officers as the command section of this platoon. Or because his movement and armor is the same as these corps officers, he could join them. So now this group of 4 models would be the command section for this platoon. Now one thing to keep in mind, Rhino has a slightly higher army point value than I'd be able to put into this current platoon if I was trying to keep it to 150 points. Instead I might have to make some adjustments, but for example's sake, I just wanted to show you how that works. Now we've talked about units and their weapons, and their movement, and their attack, and their health. What about their special abilities? Because that's something you really have to take into consideration when you're building your army. If we look at the Axis zombies as an example, they have 3 special abilities. Blitzcruise Zombie, Damage Resilient, and Fast. All of the special abilities are of course defined in the manual. If you print out some custom unit cards, they're also put on there as well. I'm not going to explain all the different abilities, but I will take the time to just show you these 3 special abilities on the Axis zombies to give you an idea of the kind of impact these special abilities can have. As you can see, the Blitzcruise Zombie ability allows these mindless creatures to ignore all suppression. They'll never take a suppression token. These mindless zombies will press on through gunfire, ignoring the bullets whizzing past their heads. Also, because of this aggressiveness, you always downgrade their cover 1 step. So if they're in soft cover, they're actually considered to be in no cover at all. And you can see they're rather picky about who they hang out with. They'll only allow a hero with the Blitzcruise Zombie ability to join them. Damage Resilient is a neat one too, because this unit gets an automatic extra die for armor rolls. I like to think of this as these zombies being able to shrug off pain. I mean, they're undead already. So if you want to put one of these down, you're going to have to use some excessive force. And lastly, their fast ability allows them to move an additional 6 inches when they take a move action. Some special abilities you'll notice have the word shared beside them. This means that a model in the unit with that ability shares that ability with the entire unit. Knowing what you now do about special abilities, if you were to go back to our earlier instructional episodes where we gave suppression tokens to act as zombies, you would now realize that could never happen in an actual game. Special abilities allow you to bend and sometimes break the rules of the game, creating new opportunities for you to make strategic decisions. And so now we know how to build an army, the role of heroes, and special abilities. Now, I'm really excited about the next episode because I'm going to get to take everything, put it all together, and show you how a game round works in Dust Warfare. And because you now know so much about the details of gameplay, I'm really hopeful it's all going to snap together like a puzzle, and you're going to have a really good sense of how this all comes together. Until then, thanks for watching.